Hey guys, welcome back to the Speaker's Edge podcast, the podcast designed with you specifically in mind to help you to learn from some of the world's very best speakers and communicators so that you can master your message and inspire your audience every single time you speak. I'm your host for this podcast, Roddy Galbraith. I'm thrilled you're back with us today. We've got another great interview in the Expert Series. Today we're talking to Dr. Robert Cialdini, the author of Influence, master of influence really. So much great material on influence. We're going to be digging into that, and specifically we're going to be talking about what's the difference between ethical influence and manipulation. How do you know the difference? Because it's easy sometimes to drift from one to the other, typically towards the manipulation when there's something in mind, when you love your program or you love your product. So how do we keep ethical influence in mind? We're going to talk about that. Before we get to that though, don't forget to download the companion resources for the show. Simply go to maxwellleadership.com/the Speaker's Edge, and you can download the companion resources. And we would love it if you download the episodes and rate and review the show as well. Thank you very much in advance for that. All right, without further ado then, let's dive into the interview with Dr. Robert Cialdini, and then we'll chat about it at the end. Make sure you take lots of notes. So first of all, in the book, you talk about the difference between kind of ethical influence and like manipulating people. Can you talk a little bit about that and help us understand the difference?
It's crucially important, not only to the self-regard of the people who are presenting information. We want to be able not just to produce change, we want to be proud of the way that we did it. And for me, there are 6 universal principles of influence that I claim if we include in a message, in a presentation, significantly increase the likelihood that people will resonate to that message, will find themselves agreeable to it. But one of them, for example, is scarcity. You know, the idea that people want more of those things they can have less of. I saw an article in a journal in which they surveyed a large supermarket chain and they looked at what was the promotion over all of the years of their existence that was the most successful whenever they tried this kind of promotion. And it was a maximum of 3 items per customer.
Really?
If you limit availability, if it's rare, if it's scarce, if it's dwindling in availability, people get a little crazy to have it. So I was in a shop a while ago, and I wasn't really looking to buy a television set, but I saw a big screen TV that I had seen in Consumer Reports was very highly rated, and it was on sale, right? And I was standing before, there were some brochures underneath, I was paging through them, and the salesman came up to me and he said, "I see you're interested in this set at this price. I can see why. It's a great deal, but I have to tell you, it's our last one." It's our last one. And I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and he said, "There's a woman from Scottsdale who just called me, said she might be in this afternoon to get it." 20 minutes later, I'm wheeling out with this TV I didn't want to start with.
But you had to have
it. And I'm supposed to be the doctor of influence. Right? So, here's the question. The scarcity principle worked on me. Was it manipulation? Or was it education? Did that salesperson honestly inform me of a principle of influence that was inherent in the situation? Or was it a trick?
Was he lying?
So that's the key to manipulation versus persuasion. If we manufacture or fabricate or counterfeit the presence of one of these principles of influence in a situation, scarcity, it could be authority. You claim to have credentials and knowledge that you don't really have. Or consensus, social proof. It's the fastest growing or largest, when it's not. When you just use those as levers for change. That's, I consider, unethical. That's an unethical use. But if it's true that you have credentials, genuine credentials in this area. You're knowledgeable. I want to know that about you, Roddy,
Right.
before, so that I can take that into account and believe you to a greater extent because you're an expert.
Yeah.
Or if it is the case that a lot of people like me have chosen this particular option, I want to know that too, because that gives me an idea this is probably a good product or service for my category. And in the case of scarcity, if this man had failed to tell me that it was the last one, and it was true, right? And I went home to think about it, and I came back the next day and it was gone. I would be angry at him.
He hadn't done his job.
He hadn't done his job of informing me properly into a choice that I was fully informed about. Right. I would have been angry at that. But if that was a trick, right? Then he was a manipulator. Right. Then he didn't educate me into change. He manipulated me into change. So here's what I did. I went back the next day.
And asked him.
No, I looked to see, was that spot on the shelf empty? Or had he just gone to the storeroom and replaced that with another? It was empty.
Right.
And so here's what I did. It was ethical. I went back to my office and I wrote a review, very positive review of the store, and I named that particular salesperson. If he had tricked me, I would have written a very negative review of both. So I think that's the key. Is the principle there? If so, you're entitled to use it because you are informing people into yes. And I think not only is that ethically acceptable, I think it's ethically commendable.
Right. That's great. So you're providing information to help people make accurate decisions.
That's right.
Because you do see people who are speaking who are saying, well, we've only got 10 of these left, and people rush to the back and buy them. Oh, actually, we found another 10. Great. So,
that's right. That's right.
That's manipulating.
Yeah, that's manipulating.
What about, because when people are speaking, they worry perhaps about what the audience think about them if they're going to sell. Often people don't like selling. But what you're talking about is the responsibility or the thinking of the person is a moral responsibility, I suppose, for them to present it correctly, irrespective of how it's perceived.
Right.
It's your job to provide the information.
Yes, and it produces long-term relationships when you provide information of benefit to your audience. If you do what you were suggesting, hey, we've only got 10 of these left, and then later on, we found 10 more, or at the next conference, it's also only 10 of these left.
Everyone's onto you.
People turn off.
Right.
You've lost the relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, another one of, one of the principles you say there's 6 key principles that you include. Do you need to include them all, or is it effective if you just use 1 or 2 of them, or the more you use, the more powerful, or does it depend? It's not simple.
It turns out that if there are more than one inherent in the situation, you're entitled to use them and you get an additive effect.
Right, okay.
But you shouldn't import one into the situation where it doesn't naturally exist just because it works.
Right.
So you find the one that's there. My suggestion is to be a detective of influence. You go into a situation, what's truly inherent here? What is the case? What's present here? You uncover that, bring that to the surface, and then that's the way you choose which of the principles to employ.
Right. Okay.
Not the one that's your favorite.
Yeah.
You know, I have a colleague, he was a marketing professor, and he said he embarked on a 2.5-year program of research to find the single most effective influence tactic.
Right.
The one that was going to be most effective, overpowers the rest of them. And I saw him at a conference a while ago. He caught me by the elbow. He said, "Bob, I found it. I found the single most effective influence approach. It is not to have a single influence approach." It's a fool's game.
Right.
To think that the same principle, the same approach is going to work for all audiences in all situations, that's silly. So the idea is see what's there in the situation,
right,
uncover it, bring it to consciousness, and then everybody wins.
Detective of influence, love it. Okay, one of the things that we tell people a lot with speaking is you want to try and present yourself as a confident, likable expert. It's very easy to remember, confident, likable expert. And I know likable and being an expert is two of the principles. So how important is likability, and how can people kind of leverage that?
Likability is very important. People give grace to those they like.
Right.
You know, they give them the benefit. So you can fumble a little bit. If they like you, that's fine. If they don't, it's down a chute. So likability, very important. And then confident, yes. And that's why preparation is so important.
Right.
What bespeaks of confidence is someone who doesn't say a lot of ums and ahs and in the middle, as if they're searching.
Right.
They don't have a good grasp of their material. And also, if you speak slightly more rapidly than average,
that's more confident or less confident?
you're seen as more confident.
Oh, that's interesting.
It seems as though you're in touch with your material. You can get easy access to the ideas and so on. So slightly more speed, not too much. Then you sound like one of those guys on the radio, you know, who's selling used cars. But it's interesting that you said likable and confident. When I was starting out my speaking career, I went to a friend who was a professional, not a trainer, but he had been in the broadcast business for a long time, national broadcast business. And he said, be enthusiastically credible.
Enthusiastically
credible. Energetically credible. So have a lot of dynamism, and I think that applies to the idea of confidence.
Right.
If you're energetic, again, it suggests that you really know your materials. You speak a little faster. You're not a lot of ums and ahs and pauses and so on. And then the credibility part, the idea that you are you're somebody who is not just knowledgeable, but you're also trustworthy in the message that you're sending.
Right.
Because that's what credibility is.
They're two different things, are they?
But it's that combination of things, knowledgeable and trustworthy, makes for credibility. And research around the world shows the single most effective communicator is a credible communicator.
Right.
If you have those two things in the eyes of your audience, no one can beat you.
It's trustworthy and credible, or
trustworthy and knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable.
Combined make credibility. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So on the well, why do these things work actually? Because that I found very interesting in the book, where we look for shortcuts at times of uncertainty, or thinking takes too long. So what can we do to just make a quick decision? Oh, they're an expert, I'll go with that. Or
exactly. We live in what is unquestionably the most information overloaded, stimulus saturated environment that's ever existed on our planet. We need shortcuts to get through it all. Right? And these 6 principles, my claim is, they are rules of thumb. If you say yes to someone who is an authority, you're usually going to be right. Right. If you say yes to evidence that a lot of people just like you are doing something, you're usually going to be right. If you seize attractive options that are dwindling in availability, you're usually going to be right to do so. So that's why these principles work. They normally steer us correctly. And so, not always, of course, but nothing works like that. But normally, we can be right without having to process a lot of information, try to get new information, draw the pros and the cons, and we would stand frozen, calibrating and considering, while the opportunity for change sped by us.
Right.
Yeah.
Price is another one, isn't it? My wife always picks out the most expensive things because she thinks they're the best, and I guess they usually are. They probably are.
You know, in my book, I tell the story of a friend of mine who owned a turquoise jewelry store in Arizona, and she had a set of turquoise jewelry that wasn't selling, so she was about to go on a buying trip, and she wrote to her head salesperson, everything in this case, priced by 1/2, right? When she got back, it had sold out completely. She wasn't surprised by that.
So it's a 50% reduction in price, and it's sold
Except that the saleswoman read the 1/2 as a 2 and doubled the price, and that made it so.
Right.
That made it attractive to visitors, tourists to Arizona who didn't know much about turquoise jewelry and used price as a stand-in for quality.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. So the principle of a high price gives us a shortcut that this is probably good and we should get it.
That's right.
Not all the time, I guess. But
Not all the time.
Yeah.
But normally, it's the case
yeah.
that the higher quality items are more expensive.
Which is another influence approach, I guess, on price at the other end, or maybe it's value and
value.
Price.
Sure,
Right.
sure, value. Of course, to do that, that's a principle that I don't even deal with in my book as one of the 6, because it's so true. People want those things that are most valuable.
Right. Okay.
So I say, yes, I have a footnote that said, of course, that's the case. Whenever you can arrange that circumstance, you're going to win.
Right.
But if you can't, here's some other things. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's great. I just want to go back to something you said that's intriguing. You said if there's other people like you doing this, then of course you're probably going to be right. How important is that group of people then that they're like you? And
yes, it's very important, because when we are uncertain, when we're trying to decide what to do, we don't look inside ourselves for answers, right? That all we see is the confusion, the lack of confidence. We look outside, and we look around to people like us. If all your friends, the people you hang out with, love a new movie, or a new restaurant, or a new piece of software, that's a shortcut.
Right.
Oh, that means people like me have an affinity for this particular product or service. I'm probably going to like it too as a result.
Right. Okay.
And you can. We did a study in hotel rooms where we put a sign in the rooms that asked people to reuse their towels. Right? You've seen those signs, right?
Yeah.
And the usual one is, do this for the environment.
Yeah.
In some rooms, we put a sign that said, the majority of people who come to our hotel do reuse their towels at least once during their stay. And we get a significant increase, right? That's not people like me, that's people in general. That's the principle of social proof, right?
Right.
We get the most if we say, the majority of people who've stayed in this room in the past have reused their towels.
Ah, what? Because
some dimension of similarity.
Right.
And that produced the greatest increase in towel reuse. So every way you can find to emphasize a commonality, a similarity, some connection that you share with your audience.
Right.
That's
John talks
gold.
about connecting on common ground, find common ground to connect on. I guess that's what you're talking about exactly, isn't it?
Find common ground first, and then that's the platform from which you can advance. Yeah.
Okay, what about under likability? One of the things I found interesting in the book was that flattery works even if people know that you're lying, which just seems bizarre, or even if they think it's not total, or you have something to gain, it still works.
Well, it's because people like you.
Right.
Similarity says people like those who are like them.
Right.
Compliments, flattery says people like those who do like them and say so, right?
Right.
So that's essentially either of those directions will produce success. But again, for me, if you provide phony compliments.
Yeah, it's a turn-off, isn't it? It's like, it pushes you away, yeah.
But also, what I like about identifying something truly commendable about a person that you can honestly spend a little time.
So that's the detective element
be
again.
the detective.
Yeah.
Find something that's
True,
that's
genuine.
admirable about somebody, and then say it.
Yeah.
Right. That person will like you for recognizing that about themselves.
Right.
You will like them because you found something more likable, and now you have two people who like one another interacting. It doesn't get better than that in business.
Great.
Two people who like one another.
Yeah, people, I guess, we'd rather do business with people we like than people we don't.
Every time.
What about reciprocity? There was the example you gave in the book about the Coke cans, I think it was. Was it where you bought them a can of Coke and they bought a load of lottery tickets or something, or raffle tickets?
Yes. So there's a long-standing rule in every human society, by the way, that you are obligated to give back to people who have first given to you.
Right.
So in that study that you talked about, the researchers arranged for two people to be in a study. They were rating pictures in an experiment. One of them was actually a confederate of the experimenter. And in one condition, left the room and came back empty-handed. And then the experiment began again. There was a break in the experiment. In another condition, left the room with 2 cans of Coca-Cola and said to the other subject, the true subject, I got myself a Coke. I thought you might like one too. Right? Then later on, after the experiment was over, he said to this recipient of the gift, I'm selling raffle tickets, and I wonder if you could buy some from me, And if he had given them a Coke, they bought twice as many raffle tickets.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, when you say it?
You give back to those who have given to you. So one of the things I try to teach is, look for ways to benefit. We're taught to go into a situation room and say, who can help me here? Who can benefit me? Here's my take on that. Go into the room and say, whom can I help here?
Right.
Whom can I benefit? Because that person will stand ready to give back to me as a consequence by virtue of this rule that has been trained into us from childhood.
And they're unequal exchanges, aren't they? I mean, the lottery tickets were a lot more than
the lottery tickets were a lot more than that Coke.
Yeah.
Yes, and people will give back to even the score, even if it's it's a larger return request, because they just don't want to feel indebted.
Right.
They don't want to violate this rule.
That's great. What about another one? They all intrigued me, as I said, but the commitment and consistency is really powerful as well. And I think that the surveys that people do was an interesting element of it. But the little sign, I respect road safety or something. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is a great one.
Yeah.
This was done at Stanford University, Palo Alto, California. This beautiful place. Everybody takes very nice care of their homes and their lawns and everything. And the researchers came to one set of homes and said, could you put a little sign in the corner of your windshield or your home, a window in your home, that said, National Driver Safety Week, please drive carefully, right? It was such a small request. Almost everybody did it. Okay. When they came back a week later and said, we were here last week and now we have, you were kind enough to support driver safety. Would you be willing to put a billboard on your lawn that obscured a third of the house from the street that said drive safely.
Right.
And 76% of people were willing to do it.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
These are people who cared. They would be, cutting the edges of their
Manicured
lawn with a
lawn.
pinking sheet. And the researcher said, "Don't worry, we'll dig the post holes in your lawn." 76%.
That's unbelievable.
You get that by first getting people to move in a particular direction.
Right.
Then they're more willing to.
And without putting the sticker in the window, then I guess most people would say you're joking.
Only
I don't know.
17% were willing to do it without the sticker first.
Yeah. So making that commitment. And so like Weight Watchers, I think, use that principle, don't they? Is it like a public declaration? It's important that the declaration is in front of other people, not just to yourself.
That's right. Those commitments are most effective when they are active.
Right.
When so you behave. You don't just keep it in your mind. They're active. They're public, and they're voluntary. So if your boss pushes you to sign a petition in favor of something or another, nope. Right. That's not a commitment. Yeah. That's not mine.
Right.
I don't own that choice.
So are you choosing who you are then in that moment? Because I think you used the word self-image at one point in that paragraph. I vaguely remember that it's, by making those decisions, you're changing your self-image. You're changing the way you see yourself. I'm now someone that believes in road safety or makes a stand for road safety.
I'm the kind of person who says yes to public service requests.
Right.
When you've done it in the first place, provided that you've done it actively, publicly, and voluntarily.
Right.
It says, this is who I am. That behavior sends you that information. Yeah.
That's great. We've only got a few minutes left, but we're just on the walk down here. We were just talking about your next kind of body of work. I don't know if it's out there already, or you were talking about the internet and how that changes things.
Oh yeah.
Could you just talk for a few minutes about that, because this is, really fascinating.
Certainly. So I'm revising my book, Influence.
Right. Okay.
And it is to take into account the rise of the internet and the existence of all kinds of platforms now for making persuasive appeals or sending messages of one sort or another that didn't exist before I wrote this new edition. So the previous edition was 10 years ago.
Right.
Social media, e-commerce, electronic marketing, digital commerce of all sorts. Those things are now prevalent, prominent, and the new book is going to examine, along with other forms of persuasion, how the electronic media carry these messages.
So it's the same principles, but it's going to be, this is a very particular application of how you can use them effectively in today's world.
That's right. If you've ever been on Airbnb or Amazon, they'll say only 3 of these left, or that's scarcity, or 15 other people are looking at this. All of a sudden, hey, look, this must be right. This must be good. So. So they're onto this. They're onto this. There's one other thing. I know this is about making public presentations.
Yeah, well, influence generally. So
But one thing I've noticed when I make platform presentations is frequently I'm asked, "What music would you like to be played onto the stage with?" And typically, what I see is mostly it's people choose very high energy, beat to get the audience excited and so on. But I'm not that kind of speaker. I want a contemplative audience.
Right.
I want them ready to learn. So I use Aretha Franklin's Think.
Oh, right.
Think, all these things. Think about. So that's the message I send persuasively. The last book I wrote was Persuasion.
I've got that on Audible, actually.
Yeah, and what do you do before you make your case?
Right.
That lends itself. That's befitting the message that you are going to send later. And that's it. I want to put people in a mindset of being thoughtful and considered, because I'm an informational speaker, not a motivational speaker. Yeah.
Okay, one last word to speak on just before we finish, because people need a reason, don't they? I can't believe we missed that. Can you just talk about that?
Now, there's good evidence that people need reasons for what they do. And there's a signal that we give linguistically that I'm about to give you a reason.
Right.
It's the word because, right? And when people hear you say because, you can essentially just restate what you've already said, and now it seems like a reason.
Right.
And they're more likely to say yes to it when it's preceded by the word because.
You use the photocopying example. Is it okay if I push in front of you because I need to make some copies?
That's right. There was a great study like that. People said they went to a photocopier at a university and tried to cut in line. And if the individual said, "Excuse me, can I cut ahead of you in line because I'm in a rush?"
Sure, okay.
94% said yes, right? If they said, "Excuse me, can I cut ahead of you?" Now only 63% said yes. But if they came, and here's the crucial one, and said, "Can I cut ahead of you in line because I have to make some copies?" 93% said.
It doesn't even need to be a proper reason.
Because I have to make some copies.
Yeah, of course. That's why.
That's why we're all here. That was not a legitimate reason, but it had the feel of a reason because it was preceded by the word because.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's Dr. Cialdini. What a wealth of information he is on the topic of influence. Isn't it fascinating to think about the difference between ethical influence and manipulation, and why we're doing what we're doing, why we're trying to be persuasive, why we're trying to encourage people to take whatever action it is that we're encouraging them to take. And are we doing it for us because we want to get something from the situation and the relationship, or are we doing it for them because we want to help them in some way? We want to give them something. So is it about us getting what we want, or is it about us helping them get what they want? Fascinating. I love it. Now, on previous episodes, you'll have heard me talk about the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. If you want to find out what it means to be a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, then simply go to maxwellleadership.com/speak. And you can find out how to book a call with a program advisor. They'll tell you a little bit about the program. You can find out if it's a fit for you. And if it is, you'll be very, very pleased that you made that conversation. There's around 60,000 coaches worldwide now in 168 different countries around the world, 169 different countries around the world, going up all the time, practically every country in the world. And the program is vast. There's so much great value in there. There really is. But if you're interested in developing your speaking, which is why I mention it here, then it really is a no-brainer. There's a great wealth of information to help you develop your speaking. The Maxwell method of speaking is John's kind of system distilled down into a number of different principles that anyone can apply. After a lifetime of very intentionally growing as a speaker, these principles extracted from his journey so that you can apply the Maxwell method of speaking to your speaking and take a quantum leap forward with your communication, your connecting, and your influence. So simply check it. It's no obligation. So simply check out the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. Go to maxwellleadership.com/speak. Okay, that's it for this week then. Thanks so much for joining us on The Speaker's Edge. See you in the next episode. And don't forget, developing your communication, developing your influence, ethical influence, becoming more persuasive when you speak, it's a learnable skill. It's a skill that you can learn, and I think you should learn. At least spend some time developing your ability to communicate so that you can master your message and really learn to inspire your audience every time you speak. See you soon. Thanks. Lots of love. Bye-bye. God bless.